Welcome to Career Cafe. Today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about building bridges, the power of networking. Joining us today, we have Brandon Street, Jerry Ross, and moderator McKinley Hatch, myself, experts in career and professional development topics. So why don't we dive into networking, talk a little bit about that. Why don't you guys tell me what networking is? And of course, our followers too. I just really want to know what networking is, you know?
That's a great question. Networking is scary, right? Isn't that? Don't we all get a little nervous when we hear that word? Networking.
I don't.
What, Jerry?
No.
Jerry
Okay.
does not get nervous networking. He is
Okay.
the best networking man.
You know what? I actually believe that because I've never seen Jerry get nervous talking to someone. But for the rest of all of humans, networking can be a scary word. I know, as I talk with students and I talk about networking, that's one of the things that kind of makes them sweat just a little bit because what do we think about when we think about networking? It's about, I've got to go out and I've got to be professionally dressed and I've got to have my resume or I've got to have a 30-second speech, you know what I mean? Like I've got to do all these things in a formalized area, you know what I mean? Or formalized party or something like that. But it's not that, right? Networking happens every single day, and it can be a very natural thing that we do. Do we need to be a bit intentional? Yes, in some regard we do, but networking can happen online, in person, over social media, in our classroom, at conferences, right? It can take place anywhere we are, right?
And inside of that role, I say that I'm comfortable networking, and I say that I'm comfortable networking because I've practiced it. And the first time you do it, yes, you're nervous, and yes, your hands are palmy, and yes, your face is turning red, and all of those things. But just like everything else we do, the more we do it, the more natural it becomes. But you also have to evolve from your infancy stages of networking. And I like to kind of think about, how do I use network strategically to build relationships and expand my opportunities? And I try and say everything isn't just a conversation. It's a place where you can store data to use it next time. Case in point, yesterday, I'm having a conversation with someone around campus, and they're looking to print towels for our football games. Oh, my old next door neighbor, he used to own, or still owns, a printing company where they do these kind of things. Do you have his number? Yes, I have his number. Contact the neighbor, get the email address. There's all kinds of ways that we can use our little social circles to expand things if we think of it in that context. How can we align these people that we've established connections with over the years? And especially as a student, now is our time to practice. So that when you need this time, when you're ready to enter the career field, you're more natural interacting with people.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Jerry. Networking shouldn't be just about what we can get from it. And I think that's a key to networking. It's how can we help each other? And if we go into a conversation understanding I think we could help each other some way, or at least going in trying to meet somebody and then understanding how we could have a collaborative relationship, if you will. That's natural networking, right? And I love the example you gave there, right? So, but how do we do that? That's a question, right? Like, how do we naturally network? Well, if you don't mind, McKinley, I want to talk a little bit about what I call the circle of influence. Is that all right? So kind of transitioning into this, how do we do it? To me, I describe this circle of influence starting with those that we know the most, right? And so the inner part of our circle of influence is typically our family, right? Our immediate family and those that we know there. They can be a great resource for networking that I think sometimes we overlook. They know people as well. They can connect us to people and things and resources if we ask in the right way, right? And so the circle of influence starts there, and then as it expands out, it's close friends and maybe people that we attend social events with, things like that. And then you get a little bit further out from there, and it may be people in your neighborhood or people that you go to school with or things like that, right? And so as we talk about the circle of influence, when we start the networking process, if it's not natural for you to do, start right at the center of that, right? Start with family and friends and expand from there.
And I like to say everywhere I go is an opportunity to network. We think about some of the traditional ways, like industry events, professional associations, online communities, but I also kind of like to use it everywhere I go. Am I establishing a contact that we can use to better the business? And I use it through a basic strategy of trying to contribute more than I consume, right? Like you said it before, I'm always willing to give things because later I might be wanting to come for something, and they know that I'm the person that's trying to contribute to what they're doing. So when the time comes for me to ask for something, it's a mutual relationship for both of us. But I think those things are great opportunities to make connections, especially through the college experience. Whether you're going on ground or online, you're interacting with people that you might be able to use that connection later to help you grow professionally.
I think it's important to touch on professors and classmates. I know we mentioned this in our last podcast episode. You could be sitting in the same room as your future boss. So making sure you are having good conversations with them and collaborating with them well, especially on group projects and different things in class. But networking can be talking to a classmate. And that is something that took me like a long time to understand, was learning that's networking, because networking seems like what Jerry was saying to me, attending these conferences and talking to people, or going to all of these big events and talking to people there. And it doesn't have to look like that for everybody, and it won't look like that for everybody.
That's right. And the more natural we can make networking, the easier it will be for us. And again, this is just something, if we learn to do as humans, we can be effective in a lot of different things we do, right? But also when we do need help, like Jerry's saying, obviously you want this to be a mutual relationship in any regard. So when you do need to ask for something, they don't feel like that's all you do, right? But it is kind of this natural events. So,
and some techniques that I've used have been effective listening, and I try and kind of make sure when I'm interacting with people, I will awkwardly give it a second in between when they're done talking, just to make sure I'm not interrupting them. I want to make sure that I'm wholly listening to everything that they have to say. I make an attempt to maintain eye contact. I also like open-ended questions. Sometimes I'll interact with people and I may think I know what do they need or how can I help, but my thought might be different than how they're actually feeling. So I try and get their opinion and ask open-ended questions in an attempt to show genuine interest. I do have genuine interest, but I want them to feel like I'm genuinely interested in that.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned genuine interest. I just had a conversation with a colleague just the other day about how networking's scary because it doesn't feel authentic. It's like a forced interaction, right? And so how to make it less forced and make it really authentic, because that's some barrier that a lot of people are going through, I think, and a lot of people feel like it is a forced contact. And so next I wanted to dive into an elevator pitch and your personal branding when networking, right? That elevator pitch is how you start out that conversation interaction a lot of the times. How do you go about these things feeling authentic and genuine, and in the way you are networking while utilizing your elevator pitch and starting those conversations naturally?
Yeah, because you don't want that to feel like robotic, right? Someone's like, hey, how are you? Who are you? Tell me about yourself. And all of a sudden you're like, I graduated from, and it feels robotic. But again, I think it just comes back to understanding, what would I say if somebody just asked me that doesn't know me, who are you, right? Tell me about yourself. And I think it's understanding the event that you're at and the atmosphere of what you're doing. Is there's probably different elevator pitches too, right? I mean, I'm going to tell everybody about where I graduated from, what my experience is, and things if I'm at like a dinner party or something, right? That's not what they're asking me. They don't want to know that. But if I am at a work event, I probably do need to tell them where I work, where I graduated, and things like that. So understanding, first of all, where you are is important, and then having kind of that summary of an introduction, it should be very natural, but it's just understanding where you are, who you're with, and what they really want to know, right?
Yeah, and when you were talking earlier about your circle of influence, I traditionally talk to people about your elevator pitch should not include mom, dad, brother, sister, dog, cat. But if your circle of influence, if you're interacting with family members, it can include mom, dad, brother, sister, dog, cat, right? Like you're trying to establish that connection and how are you moving forward. But when you're talking about coworkers or organizations, it does not need to include mom, dad, brother, sister, dog, cat. It's about how can you contribute? How can you work together? Maybe you can solve a problem that they may have, whether that's a manpower problem or just some insight into something that they needed a little bit of help with. I really like to offer help, and I think help is the easiest way to connect with someone when you're in those networking things, is to share your experiences, ask them to share theirs, and then see if there's some collaboration that the two of you can have on something.
So let's get an example of this just real quick. Because yesterday I was at a meeting, a work meeting, where we were being introduced to some new leaders on campus. And, I look over and Jerry is over there talking with all the new basketball coaches that are on campus, right? He's making his way over through all of these coaches. What did that interaction look like, Jerry? I'd love to know, when we talk about an example of networking, what was that like for you? You didn't know these gentlemen before, did you?
Nope.
Okay, so tell me about this real quick. Give us a good example of what networking was like.
So I just kind of walked over, and previously I'd met with a basketball student this week. So I just said, hey, how's it going, guys? And then I said, hey, do you know this person's name? I'm not going to throw their name out there for everyone today right now. And they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, they came up and they were looking for some on-campus things, and we pointed them a direction, and it was like, oh, they were really struggling with things. And then it just opened the floodgates, right? Like there was some sort of secondary connection that the two of us had. And then 90 seconds in, we're long-lost old friends and talking about the recruiting stomping grounds of where I played basketball compared to where they did. Sometimes it's just that little spark of, how's your day going? How's summer going? Man, there's a ton of students around. You guys busy with those? No, they're not mine. Whatever we can do to just break that ice usually gets the information flowing. I wish I had a better story to tell than that one. But it's just, I'm great at cold introducing myself and just saying, hey, I'm Jerry. This is what's going on. How can we work together? What do you guys do? What can we do to help?
Yeah, I love it.
I have a question. Jerry mentioned not in a professional setting, not the mom, dad, brother, sister, cat, dog, that scenario.
Good
but
job.
then we're
You did that
talking
just
about,
as he did. Yeah,
I know, I was like, how do I remember all these in order? Did I get it in order?
Almost. I think you just about did. So
Dang, pretty good. Pat on the back. So we talked about that, right? Maybe don't bring those up in a professional setting. But that's where I'm struggling to understand. And maybe our fellow listeners, I don't know. Where is that drawn? Because we're talking about trying to be authentic. We're bringing up basketball. We're bringing, casual conversations. Isn't that what networking is too?
What a great question. I think that's a really good question. I think that's just not where it starts.
Okay.
Right. And so, again, knowing where you are, if I'm at a conference for work, right, let's just use that as an example. I'm at a conference for work and someone says, hey, tell me about yourself. I'm not going to start with that list, right, of my family and my pets. I'm probably going to start with, I work at Southern Utah University. Here's what I do, right, and talking about those things because that's our connection. Now, does it lead into those? It might. It might just do that, right? As we talk and all of a sudden there's like the little things may come up like Jerry was talking about. Oh, hey, we played basketball in the same area. Or, hey, I'm from this area. I didn't know you were from the same state I was born in, right? And things like that may start occurring or we get to that point. And that's where it's genuine. But people are caught off guard, I think, if they're just like, so tell me about yourself. Oh, yeah, I've got 5 awesome cats. I love them. You know what I mean? Or whatever it might be. They're like, that's not what I wanted to know.
Would it be part of like reading the room a little bit maybe too?
Absolutely.
I read their shirt. It said basketball, right? So
read their shirt, read the room. Love it.
And read a little bit of the person, right? And can you find something that you can connect with on a professional level? Their shirt really did say basketball. So it kind of right there, I knew which conversation am I going to have, right? I kind of have a way of differentiating a conversation I'm having with a wrestling coach as I am a basketball coach, right? And I think part of reading the room can also be a little bit of reading the person to see, are we there?
Yeah. No, I love that. Thanks for answering all my questions, guys. I feel like a lot of the listeners maybe will have some similar ones, maybe not. Maybe it's just me. I wanted to dive into social media. This is such a big part of networking, and we kind of talked about this last episode. So listeners, if you weren't tuned in last week, you need to go listen to that. It was a great episode about job search and how social media can help in that. So let's dive into that further. Tell me how social media can help or hinder you in networking.
Yeah, that social media, first of all, social media is a networking tool. They may be different in the way that you do it on platforms, but it is networking, right? I mean, you're putting yourself out there for others. You're responding to other people. It is a way to network. And so, again, understanding that if at any time you're going to be looking for a job or things like that, whatever you put out, make sure it represents you well, right? I would speak on social media as I would if I was speaking with people in a room. I don't think there should be much of a difference in what I'm putting there. What I would say to people, that those type of people in a room, right? And so just be careful with what you put out, because it goes with you for a long time, what you put out on social media. So, but it is a great tool for you to be able to, a lot of people don't think about things like Twitter, for my generation, Facebook, right? As ways to network with people and perhaps even for closer friends on there, ask for opportunity. I mean, there's no harm in saying, hey guys, I'm looking for, a job right now and could use some help. But I will say this, if you do that, make sure that you are very specific in what your need is. A lot of times people will say, hey, I'm looking for a job. You know what I mean? Then people will give them a job and they say, well, I'm not looking for that job, right? So be specific what your need is if you are networking, through a tool like social media and that. So
yeah. I also think I want to make note of this. Whether or not you are a public profile, if you're private or public, it still impacts you the same, because your inner circle does share news and they will tell your secrets that you're sharing in a private setting on social media as well. And whether or not it is public or private, it'll get out there some way or another. So talking about social media and the way you're involved on that, be careful in what you choose to post, even though it might be private. Maybe you're posting about your political beliefs. Maybe you're posting about other things that are near and dear to you, but it might impact you later on. So just be careful with that.
I have someone that I'm personally coaching, and on their profile, 3 times this month, they have posted worst day ever, ... And then he posts, looking for a job. Does anyone know anyone that's hiring? And I called him and I said, hey, be aware that they are hiring the worst day ever 3 times this month. So think about that. If you had your circle of influence and friends and family that are on your social media profiles, if you're constantly posting those types of things, they think you're going to come to work with that worst day ever. Just be aware that what you post is what's going to be a representation of you digitally.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to dive into introverts. What does networking look like for introverts? Yeah. I feel like I'm an introvert when it comes to networking, even though I am very much an extrovert. But networking scares me, just like you were saying at the beginning of this episode. It's scary.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for introverts?
First of all, I feel like the only introvert at the table here today. Let me just say this. First of all, introverts are not hermits. Okay, just so everybody knows that. They are not hermits. They do not want to be in their home constantly. Okay, some do, but not generally.
There's levels.
There's levels. There's levels. It's like onions, right? It's got layers.
It's got layers. Oh, we're bringing in Shrek here.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
like it.
So, but I just want to point out, those introverts can naturally be a little more comfortable with that. They can be just as effective networkers as anybody, right? But there's a few things that we might suggest for introverts. First of all, start where your comfort zone is, right? If you're not comfortable in a large, busy room, then don't start there, your networking, right? Start somewhere that's a little more cozy, if you will, right? And a smaller amount of people. Also, take somebody with you the first time. I wouldn't suggest you do that all the time, especially if you're looking for a job, right? But to some of these events, take someone you could lean on a little bit the first few times that you're going, right? And don't necessarily use networking as especially as an introvert, as many people as you can get, right? Sometimes it's about quality of conversations that you have. So even if you only talk with 1, 2, 3 people, the quality of those conversations can be great, and you can really get an in-depth conversation with someone who you can help and they can help you, right? And so those are a few things I'd suggest. I don't know if anybody else has any suggestions, but that's what I'd suggest.
My last thing to add to that is when I go to networking events, because it is scary, I like to lean on a friend that I go with, or if I don't have a friend to go with, to find one person in that room that I feel like I could talk to. Just one that I can see and spot that I think I might be able to engage with and have an engaging conversation. And so my goal is often one, and that's okay.
That is okay. Yep.
Find a networking wing person.
Yeah, they're your wing woman or wing person. Yeah,
I like it. I think that's great. And honestly, again, just start where you're comfortable with. And I think once you start doing it, you're comfortable, moving to the next person potentially and the next, right? So.
Awesome. Thanks. Asking for a friend, just what networking looks like for
Right.
introverts,
Yeah.
just putting that one out there. Let's lastly wrap up on what the importance of follow-up looks like in networking. Jerry, do you want to start us on that?
I think follow-up really starts with establishing a way to find them after you networked with them. And sometimes we'll go to these events or different things and we meet a lot of people, and then you go to get in your car to go home, and Mark, Chuck, Sally, all those things are great. Do you have their phone number? Do you have their email address? Did you do something? So I'll make a habit of, after I interact with someone, I will send a text message with their name. So, hey, I talked about the towels earlier in this segment. Right then I said, are you comfortable sharing your cell phone number? Yeah. Typed a cell phone number into my cell phone and immediately sent my name with it. That's the connection right there. He has my name, I have his name. So you want to make sure that when you're networking, it's not fruitless, that you're not just interacting to interact, that you have some sort of way to follow up by getting a phone number, by getting an email, by connecting on LinkedIn or one of those other ways. I think the real number one key for me for follow-up is finding a way to be able to connect with them later the moment that I interact with them. Because after I walk away, I'm going to find someone else and I'm going to forget a name. I'm great with faces. I'm horrible with names. So I like to do that immediately as I'm interacting with them. And then I like to send them a little 24, 48 hours later. Hey, it was great interacting with you. Really enjoyed our conversation about blank. Throw them something specific about my interaction to let them know that it was meaningful for me. And then I also like to do some personalized messages offering up value. Hey, we talked about this, but just to let you know, I help align employers with students here at Southern Utah University. I would love to help out. When's a good time for us to have a quick 10 minutes? Something like that to kind of give them a little bit of value. But the long distance relationships, I feel like those are a little bit different. Brandon, do you have anything to add about establishing long distance network connections?
Yeah, I think, it goes along very similar to what you said. I don't think there's much difference except for the way you're probably going to interact next with them, right? I mean, obviously, phone call, email, things like that. But set up a time, like you said, don't let that be the last time. And don't leave by just saying, we should connect again, right? Like, do connect again. Find out a way to find an actionable item to be able to connect with them again in some way that is purposeful so you don't lose that contact. That's really important.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And thank you listeners for tuning in to Career Cafe. Subscribe to our channel and tune in next episode. We're going to be talking more about uncovering your hidden potential by applying for jobs you may not feel qualified for and how to go about that. So tune in next week. Once again, you're listening to Career Cafe, and we're going to end it with a dad joke from Jerry.
Did I tell you guys that I used to work at the helium factory?
No.
What?
I quit. I refuse to be spoken to in that tone.
Nice, Jerry.
I love it. Thanks, listeners. Tune in next week.